Well, it's winter time and the days are short. I'm out here at the ranch. I got my camper trailer set up. Not a lot to do in the evening when it's dark, so I think I'll go ahead and share a short story with you. I'm going to call this one Don't Be a Crybaby. So, back in the late 80s, all through the 90s and the early thousands, I was a climber. Like rocks and mountains and big walls. I'm not talking about going to a climbing gym or climbing the rock wall that they put up at the county fair. I mean, that's hard and difficult in its own way. But what I did with my friends was go out into the wilderness and actually climb a rock face. And there are places on those rock faces that it's pure vertical, overhung, maybe a little off if you're lucky. And right there where you're putting your feet, there might be nothing more than a screw head on a switch plate. You know, if you got the whole switch plate edge, you could probably have lunch on that. we were climbing some pretty thin stuff, and as that evolves and it keeps going on, you keep challenging yourself to do more and more, and you might climb a big mountain. Like I've been all the way up in Alaska and climbed Denali, but easily the hardest thing that I ever climbed was the face of El Capitan in Yosemite Valley in California, and it's over half a mile high. It's 3,000 and some change, I think, feet. And there's that guy Hamill who recently climbed it without a rope a couple years ago. Man, that's a level of craziness I couldn't understand, man. Yeah, I was using that rope hard when I was climbing it. But I went up there to climb it, and I went with a friend of mine. He's from Czech Republic. His name is David. And when the Soviet Union fell apart, they kind of got their freedom, and one of the first things him and his wife Pavlina did is they traveled all over the country, the United States, that is, to see all the national monuments. They've seen more than I've seen, and I've seen a lot. Um, but I met them climbing out in Joshua Tree, and we became friends, and we started meeting all over the country, different places to climb, and we decided to go to Yosemite and climb the nose of El Capitan. And again, that's a big one. It's pretty vertical. And when you climb, there's a few things you need to know about it. In our days, we had to carry everything with us. Everybody does that today, but you take everything you need. We planned on being on that rock face for 3 days and 2 nights, and topping off on the third morning. And so you bring in a little portaledge. Basically it was a like the old-fashioned hammocks with webbing in it that you saw from the 1960s. We had one of those that we'd strung all up, and you hang it up, and you could sleep in it at night, and you have a big haul sack that comes up underneath you, and slang for that is it's often called a pig, but it's a haul sack, and it brings all your food and water up with you as you go, and then you've got all your gear, and the gear plugs into the cracks, a weakness. So if you've got a crack in the mountain, you plug your gear in there and you work it in and you wedge it in, or it's a cam and it opens up. Could be a chock, any number of things. Driving pitons in like in the movies. Even in my day, that was a rare experience. That was easily out 15 years before I even started climbing. And driving pitons is destructive. When you hit the hammer and the piton, you chip the rock, and so the hole keeps getting bigger and bigger, and you're damaging the rock. And so over the years, climbers have developed passive ways of protecting, wedges that fit into cracks and cams that open up. And so anyway, you got to carry all that gear on you with you. And so you're pretty weighted down, and just in case you're wondering, you also carry something called poop chute. And it's you don't want to be letting go down the side of the mountain. You you got a piece of tubing that you pull behind you and drop all your waste in there and get rid of it later, and it comes up. It's the last thing coming up behind you. And anyway, that's the way you do it. So when you climb, a couple things. Um, One person leads and the other person follows. Okay, and you can inchworm up like that if you have one strong climber. But in David and I's situation, we both like to lead. We're both strong climbers, so you'd lead one, and then he'd lead the other, and I'd lead the other, and he'd lead the other, and you just kind of work your way up the mountain. And the guy who's not leading is holding the rope. He's feeding rope out. He's running it through a belay device in his waist, and he's feeding it out to the other guy. And if the other guy falls, he's got to catch him. Okay, and he also puts a little tension on the rope when you need it, that kind of thing. And then there's other duties involved, like who's going to pull the haul sack up, and who's going to take the rope up, and rope management and gear management. I mean, you don't just get up in the morning and decide to do that. That's after years and years of doing what's called traditional climbing. I always called it traditional. I've heard a lot of people in slang call it trad climbing, and it tends to be people who haven't climbed that much who do that. It's all right. It's probably correct. But we're traditional climbers. We are very self-sufficient, and we're very on our own. And you get in those spots. Just a lot of times you're out there. Now Yosemite Valley, you could probably get saved, but a lot of times you're out there. Yeah, nobody even knows you're there, man. They just find a couple skeletons hanging on the side of the rock face a few years later. If they're not careful, if you make a mistake. But anyway, you follow a crack up typically as you're climbing, and there's a spot in the nose where you're following this crack, and you get to the top of it, just no more crack, and the face is pretty blank. It's about like a drywall. Has the texture of a orange peel drywall in a tract house, and you're probably not going to be able to get up that too well. But if you look over to the side, there's another crack that starts. And this is about the very beginning of the second day. And you look over there, well, how do I get over there? Well, what you do is you climb up just as far as you can, and you let some rope out, and you hang from the side of the rope, and you start running back and forth. Okay, you run back and forth. You see that? That's a pendulum. That's what climbers call it, as a pendulum. And this particular pendulum is called the king swing. It's very famous. You can look it up online. And there's guys who make it look easy. And there's guys who make it look like I made it look, which wasn't easy. I think the guys who make it look easy probably have done it a couple times. But you let the rope down, and if you let it down this far, you're going to be able to run up about that high. And you're not going to be able to run like that because you can't run vertical, but you get out about there, but you're really pushing hard against that rope. And if you put the rope up here, then you can only get to here. Well, the crack's over here, so if you put out too much rope, you're not going to get to the crack. You put out the right amount of rope, you're going to get to the crack, and if you put out too little rope, you're not going to be able to reach it. But it's quite a ways over there. It's kind of out of sight where you got to go. And so you have a kind of a general idea. And I was leading that, and David's feeding out the rope to me. Now, David's from the Czech Republic, I mentioned that, and he almost sounds like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's like, Daddy, are you on the lead or not? That's kind of the way he sounds when you're climbing. And I go, David, I'm going to lead this one. I've always heard about this king swing. I want to do it. And we did a little fussing back and forth, but he decided to let me do it. So I climb up. He lets the rope out, and I go, okay, good, right there. And I start running. And I didn't let enough rope out, and I couldn't reach the crack. Right? So I had to stop, and he let a little more rope out. I go, David, another 10 feet. So we let out about 10 feet, maybe 15. Okay? Now, before I tell you about the next attempt, I will tell you that the sun was just glaring on the rock, and there wasn't a breath of wind in that entire Yosemite Valley. And it's hot. And when you're going to do something like that, you don't bring a lot of extra gear with you and water bottles and stuff. I took a big swig of water before I left, and I took the gear that I needed to make this move. Because I want to stay light, I want to stay agile, and I need to be able to, make this move. And so there I was on the rock, in the heat, in the sun, and it getting a little hot. Now, there's no wind, and I don't know, 800 feet below me, maybe 900. I don't remember the exact height. It's been decades, right? But there were tourists walking around, and I could hear them talking, even though they were all the way down there, because it was completely windless. Their voices kind of echoed up the face of that rock, that vertical face of El Capitan. And I could hear everything they were saying. And there was an old man, a grandpa, and his granddaughter. And they're talking, and she's asking questions. What are they doing, Grandpa? And he's making answers like, they're being stupid. It looks foolish. What kind of a moron would climb a rock? I mean, he's just being pretty derogatory about our endeavor. He doesn't know we can hear him. But he's just yammering on to his granddaughter, and she's asking pretty nice questions, like, how hard it is to do this. He says, how in the hell would I know? I would never do anything stupid like that. And I can hear him, and it's a little grating. And when I didn't make the first move and I stopped down, he goes, now why the hell would somebody just swing back and forth and stop? What is that all about? He's like, these people are really stupid. And so David lets the rope out, and I make the next attempt. Well, on the next attempt, I let too much rope out, and I couldn't reach the crack that was above my head. It was just up there out of sight, and I couldn't reach it. Now, and that means I have to stop, and I've been running back and forth, and you got to understand, when you're running uphill, and you're running hard, and it's in the sun, and the heat's just glaring off of that rock. It's granite, and it's gathering all the heat at once and just reflecting it right into your face and onto your body. And I'm getting pretty strained, and I'm also getting kind of stressed. And now there's another thing that I need to share with you about climbing. In traditional climbing, there's a lot of ethics. You don't just go put a peg in the rock. I mean, if you're weak for it, you don't drill a hole and they have a thing called a bolt. It's a permanently affixed anchor. And that gets done sometimes in areas where there's just nothing to hang on to, or there's potential damage to the rock maybe. And so you can clip into that and not hurt anything, and you're pretty safe. And up at the top of where I put the rope, there were a couple anchors in there, but they were really old. They may have dated back to the original Royal Robbins expedition that did the nose, Harding was another guy that was on that, and they're just famous climbers, and those guys were out there, man. And they used these little teeny thin 1/4-inch bolts, and by the time I climbed it, they'd been stuck in the side of that rock 25 years, rusting away, and nobody would replace them because they were sacred. Well, they've been replaced nowadays. I've talked to a lot of people who've been up out there, in the past. It's been 3 decades since I was up there. And they've been replaced. They're getting pretty sketchy. Well, I'm hanging on that, swinging back and forth, and I'm not only am I tired, not only is the sun, not only am I hearing these people talk about how stupid they are, okay, I'm grinding away on these old bolts, and they're starting to get in my head. It's like one of those things breaks, man. I'm toast, because the rope goes up and back down. You're going to fall not that far, but twice as far. You're going to fall like crazy. And I'm going to hit David, man. When I say hit him, he's going to take the brunt of my fall. I mean, that'd be a pretty serious fall. Plus, I'd be all sideways and cockeyed. I wouldn't be going down straight. I would be tumbling. And that's going on in my mind. And then the last thing is David's going, what is your problem? Why can't you make the move? He goes, I'm getting bored. Come on, man, let's go. And he's just being a dick, right? And so, anyway, I go down and readjust the rope for my 3rd attempt. And I need to make it now because I'm hot and I'm thirsty, and I'm exhausted, frankly. I mean, I've already climbed the day before, out in the heat and the sun. In those days, I'm a pretty beefy guy. In those days we ran like 2 and 3% body fat. I mean, we were doing fingertip pull-ups, right? And yeah, there was no reserves for old Maynard here, and so, but I got it in my mind I'm going to make it. Going back is not a possibility. So, third time I start running, and so I start running, man. All of a sudden my throat just feels like a swelling shut because I'm so thirsty, and it's just the heat has just increased. I've been at this like a half an hour at this point. Now you watch people on YouTube, they'll do it in about a minute and a half, and there's some guys, but I missed it twice, and I was tired, readjusted ropes. It was a terrible experience, folks. And so this third time, and whole time the old man and his granddaughter just yammering on, and the whole time David's like saying really helpful things like, if you don't make it this time, you're a pussy. And I'm just like, shut up, and I get over there and I reach up, and my left hand just gets a hold of the crack, but I get like 2 fingers lodged around the edge of that rock. It's kind of like a flake. A flake, is a little rock that hangs off of the face, and I got my hand between it, my fingers between it, and I have to pull myself up to that flake. Now the rope's pulling on me this way, and I'm pulling this way, and I reach over and I'm trying to get my other hand in there, but I can't get my fingers around it, and I'm just pulling, and I'm pulling, and the rope is pulling against me this way, and I'm like, David, give me some slack, give me some slack. Now that's mildly dangerous because he's gonna give me some slack. If I let go, I got all kinds of room to be tumbling back, and that's running through my mind, and those pieces up there that are ancient are running through my mind, and those people down below are talking, and David's barking at me, and I'm hot as heck, and my throat is swollen shut from just being thirsty, and I get over there, and I've now got to pull my weight up and around this rock. And when I do that, I have to take one hand off of everything, and I got to get my foot wedged in there somewhere, and there was place for it, but I got to take one hand off and stick my protection in, and then I have to take the slack rope and hook it in so that I'm solid, right? Now, it takes about all the strength in the world for me to pull this around that I have left. I mean, normally it would be nothing, right? But I had exhausted myself, and I'd also freaked my mind out. And I get myself around there, and I'm kind of leaning in, and I'm holding. And I don't know if you've ever been this tired, but we always call it being possessed by Elvis. You're so exhausted and just about to lose control, your body starts spasming, the whole thing. And I'm sitting there being possessed by Elvis, and I got it everywhere in my body. And I'm pulling out the first piece of protection. I go to stick it in there. It doesn't freaking fit, man. It's like, and then stick it out. Another one doesn't fit. It takes me 4 times, and I finally got a piece that fits. Now you flip your carabiner down and out so you can put your rope up in it. The rope's hanging there, and I'm just sitting there just shaking violently, and I'm about to lose it, and that old man just will not shut up down below. And David's like, are you done yet, man? Are you, I was just like, okay, and I'm just concentrating, and I get a little loop of that rope, and I've got to push it into a carabiner. We've all seen a carabiner, right? Click, and I just get a loop, and I got to push in a carabiner, and I'm gold, man. I can just let go and hang on the rope, right? But until then, I'm running about flipping through. Those pieces are hanging. Those old pieces are hanging out in my mind. David's barking at me. The old man and little girl talking crap about me. Talking about how stupid I am and why don't I move. And I'm exhausted, and my throat's swollen shut, and I can barely breathe. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm pushing the rope into the carabiner, and I am so weak that I am struggling to push the rope through the carabiner. And it finally clicks in. And I didn't even do this when my mother died, but I burst into tears. I just go, "Wah!" I was so exhausted and relieved. And then an old man says, yammering on, why is he crying? I just said, shut the goddamn hell up, you old son of a bitch. David starts laughing at me. Are you crying? He's all just laughing at me crazy. And I was just like, everybody just shut up. I swear it took me 5 minutes to get my composure back. That's how crazy my mind had gone. And I'm not a guy who loses his mind like that. I mean, I've been in spots like that before, but that one really got at me. And the fact that I couldn't breathe, and I was so thirsty. And so the funny thing is, I still know David today. I mean, it's 30 years later, right? And I give him a call. He lives there in Prague. He just retired. He was a physical ed teacher at a high school, and I know his wife Pavlina really well. I mean, spent years hanging out with those guys, and she's translator. Speaks like 5 languages. But anyway, I'll call David up. He says, "Oh, Gary, it's good to hear you. Unless you're gonna cry, I'll hang up." So, don't be a crybaby.